Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Josh Zloof. He's the co-founder and CEO at Sudden Coffee. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing is really innovative and cool. And I drink coffee all day, every day. So I'm very passionate about what you guys are doing selfishly myself. But maybe before we get into all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Awesome. Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area. I was actually born in New York, but
Okay.
My dad was into tech and did a couple startups, and so we moved to the Bay Area when I was 6 or 7,
Okay.
and so grew up in Palo Alto.
Nice. That's a beautiful area of kind of Northern California, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. It was a great place to grow up. I was fortunate enough to be here, during the 90s when the first tech boom was happening. And it was a really interesting environment to be a part of and just see how, startups were evolving back then and what it was like. And I think, definitely influenced my career, obviously getting into being an entrepreneur myself.
Sure. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
Yeah. So I went to Stanford.
Okay.
I did industrial engineering.
Okay.
And so the story was I actually went to this McDonald's. This was after school. I was in Europe with a couple friends,
Okay.
and they had a really long line.
Okay.
And I was obsessed with this question of how do you make a line shorter at a restaurant? And I started looking at how you could move around the machines in the back and make it more efficient. And then when I got to college, I started asking myself, there must be a job where you can get paid to do that and to make things more efficient. And I heard about this thing called consulting, and you get paid to do that. And then I looked at different majors, and industrial engineering had all of these classes on factories and supply chain. And it was something my dad also had a startup earlier on that kind of touched on that. And so I'd heard those terms before. And so I took a couple classes, and I was like, cool, this is it for me. This is what I want to do.
That's very cool, man. No, that's fascinating. So you get out of school, you've worked at a bunch of companies. Walk me through your journey up until Sudden Coffee.
Yeah. So I left school. I joined this company called McKinsey, which is a consulting firm.
Okay.
And again, it was all about, how I could work on different efficiency problems. So I did all these consulting projects going to factories or call centers or, places like that to figure out how to make them more efficient. And did that for a few years. I was out in Boston on the East Coast. I wanted to just get out of California.
Okay.
And I always knew I would sort of come back into the tech world. Then after that, I wanted to make basically figure out how I could make an app to order food or drinks on your phone. Again, because I went to a bar with a really long line, and it was again, how do I combine efficiency and tech?
Interesting.
So moved back to the Bay Area and worked with a couple friends trying to do a startup with the three of us on making an app to order drinks.
Okay.
And through that, realized I didn't know anything about technology. I didn't know how to make a startup. I didn't know about apps. And I got a call from a friend at Groupon. Groupon at the time was the fastest growing company. And they said, hey, we want to make apps for restaurants.
Okay.
And I said, great, this sounds awesome. This is, exactly what I want to do. And so I joined Groupon, and I was the product manager for this product called Breadcrumb,
Okay.
which was basically Square for high-end restaurants.
Gotcha.
And so we were working on, exactly those types of things. Like, how could you make a restaurant more efficient with technology? How do you make orders easier? All that stuff. But yeah, the nail that, I think the thing that it totally shifted for me at some point working on that company or on that product, because I realized that food and drink and coffee included, it's not about being as efficient as possible. It's actually about hospitality. It's about making someone feel good. It's about how you can change someone's day through that really awesome experience. And so once that sort of clicked for me, and I think a big part of this also was I started going to Burning Man around this time, had an experience there where I was serving drinks to people and realized that service really made me happy. It was a way that I could connect with people. And so I left Groupon to do something related to food and service with the primary goal of making people feel good. And that really was sort of how all the ingredients fit together.
Interesting. So how did you come up with the idea, and what exactly is Sudden Coffee?
Yeah, so Sudden Coffee is the world's first single origin crystallized coffee.
Okay,
so
what does that mean?
So single origin coffee, so this is what you'd think of as like hipster coffee or third wave coffee.
Okay.
It's basically coffees that you kind of treat like wine, like you're buying coffees from specific farms. They each have really unique flavors. A coffee from Ethiopia is going to be different than a coffee from Colombia. Okay. Similarly to how, like a wine from Napa Valley is different than a wine from Bordeaux or whatever it is,
Sure.
And so normally, you go to a cafe, you pay $5 for a pour over. It takes a long time to make it. And so what we did is we took really great coffees and we crystallized it. So, it's basically how instant coffee works.
Okay.
You just mix it it comes in as a powder, and you mix it with hot or cold water. You don't need a machine.
Okay.
And you get this really awesome cup of coffee.
Interesting. So how is it different from traditional instant coffee?
Yeah, so traditional instant coffee is made using commodity level coffee beans. It's they could be 7 or 8 years old. It's brewed up to. Yeah, it's similar to getting like ripe or beans.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like dried coffee beans in these bags. It can be moldy. It can be damaged. And then they'll brew it up to 5 times to extract. They want to get as much out of the coffee bean as possible to make it dirt cheap.
Okay.
But a coffee bean, it's mostly made out of wood. And so when you extract all that stuff out of the bean, it literally tastes woody. And that's kind of what instant coffee tastes like.
Oh, well, you describe it better than I would. Most instant coffees, I think, taste like tar or something terrible.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot that goes into that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And then they dry it out by basically boiling off the water. And when you do that, you lose all the aroma because aroma boils off. So you just lose that.
Okay.
That's kind of what you get. What we did is we take really great coffee beans. Obviously, that's step one. We invented a new way to brew coffee beans that is really gentle, like a cafe would, but we figured out how to do it at scale. And that was really the hard part. And then we freeze dry it. And so freeze drying is a process that it locks the aroma into a crystal, and that's why it's literally crystallized. And then you remove the water while it's still frozen. And so you lock in all of the really good stuff.
Interesting. So walk me through a little bit of that trial and error process of actually figuring out how to do that, because it's got to be time consuming and potentially really expensive, or how did that, or walk us through that process?
Yeah. So, we went through, I think a really good example of that startup journey is starting with a minimum viable product, or an MVP, as you will call it.
Yep.
So, so I got introduced to my co-founder. He'd been in coffee for 10 years, and he had a prototype of the idea. So the very first ones that we made, we found a company that sells freeze dryers. You can buy them online.
Okay.
They're consumer grade. It's a few $1,000s.
Okay.
And so got one of those, and then looked at what we could freeze dry. So the very first thing we freeze dried was just regular drip coffee. Like make a pot of coffee, freeze dry it, and see what we got.
Okay.
And it tasted really good, but we only got 5 cups of coffee out of 36 hours of freeze drying.
Oh,
or
wow.
actually, sorry, not 36 hours, 72 hours, 3 days of freeze drying. And we got 5 cups of coffee.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, that's a problem. How do we increase how do we make it more efficient? Well, if the cost to it is more concentrated, what can we do next? We get more cups of coffee. And so we came up with the idea of using espresso. Espresso is really hard to make. It's really manual, but it's more concentrated.
Okay.
So we spent 4 hours making espresso, like hundreds of espresso shots, and freeze dried that. And then we got 60 cups of coffee out of that next 72 hours. And after that, we were like, okay, that's somewhat viable, and started selling that. And we sold enough, and we bought more dryers, and we literally hired people to pull espresso shots one at a time. And we did that for about 6 months. And then simultaneously, we were kind of scouring the planet, ways that we could brew instant coffee. Did someone have a machine? Did someone have a giant espresso machine? We're sort of like researching that. And then along the way, we've actually gone through a few different technologies, but the path was sort of, finding one technology that made things a little bit better, where, at some point we were brewing 2,000 pounds of coffee at a time, and it was coming out more concentrated than espresso, but it wasn't tasting that great, and we were kind of mixing the espresso with that coffee, and so there's just a lot of trial and error. We probably change our recipe, I would say, every 3 months. There's something different that we're doing to the process. But that was, I think the important thing along the way was, we were validating that people wanted this at small checkpoints.
Okay.
But as we were going along the way. So, even though we could only make 1,000 cups a month using that espresso process, like off of that, we were able to raise money, we were able to get PR, and that helped us get to the next level where we could then, make bigger investments or do bigger things.
Got you. So you touched on something that I was going to ask later, but I think we should cover it now. So it sounds like you self-funded at the beginning and then you raised some capital, or walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, we actually were fortunate enough to be able to raise capital from the beginning.
Okay.
And it's actually really, it makes a lot of sense in retrospect. And I think I would totally do it again this way. So, my co-founder, and he actually raised money, right before we had met. He came up with the idea of, could we make this really good instant coffee by running into a guy at a conference, and that they sort of were just talking about it. And he had access to science lab because he was still in school part-time at the time, and made a very basic prototype in a science lab.
Okay.
And then took that and then made a 5-slide deck and went to investors and said, hey, I have this vision for, this product, and here's some. It was literally in a Ziploc bag, but try it. It tastes really good. And I haven't sold any yet. But instant coffee is this huge market. It's a $30 billion market. And
wow, really?
It's a huge. Internationally, instant coffee is huge, and it hasn't seen any innovation in 20 years.
Wow.
And it was one of those things that was, an obvious, of course, that this kind of makes sense, the way that it was framed. And so from that, he was able to raise $500K just from different investors, and fortunately he had linked up. He was based in Finland, linked up with a guy in Finland who was a serial entrepreneur and sort of helped make the round happen. But that was sort of how we were able to fund the initial stages.
Interesting. No, that's really interesting. So walk me through, how did you know when you had a product that you could actually start either giving it out to people to try, or start going to stores to get them to actually put it in their shops, and start selling it online?
Yeah, so we tried to get to something like that as fast as possible.
Sure.
So I think when Kali and I had met, he had made a few of these cups, but hadn't really started selling it yet. And the company had been around, he'd started it about 2 months earlier. And in our very first meeting, the question that I was asking was, how do we sell this tomorrow? How do we sell it next week?
Right.
And what's the fastest way we can make a prototype? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, be polished. We don't need a label. We don't need any of that. Let's just sell it. And it was actually around this time 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I said, Christmas is coming up. Why don't we make a stocking stuffer? And
good idea.
just see if we can sell. Yeah, can we sell 100 of these things?
Okay.
And so we got to work. He was pulling the espresso shots. I was packaging it and making the boxes. And we threw up a website. We used Shopify.
Sure.
And we just said, hey, we have 100 of these things. We were selling it for $5 for 2, which at the time we thought was unheard of. No one's going to pay $2.50 a serving for instant coffee.
Okay.
And we put it up, blasted it on Facebook and Instagram, and we sold out in under 5 minutes.
Wow.
And so that told us, great, there's something here. Like compared to the other ideas I'd worked on, that was, crazy. So that was sort of the validation we did to say, okay, great, there's something here.
Sure. Well, to be fair, and you could tell me if I'm correct or not, like, okay, forget about the traditional instant coffee, because I think it's terrible, and I think most people that actually really enjoy coffee would agree with me. And the only other competitor I could potentially think of is the Starbucks instant coffee, but it's not very good. Like, it's drinkable, at least. That's probably best case. But is that fair to say, or what's your thoughts on that?
Like, are there
competitors
other...
for them, for you guys? Sorry.
Yeah. So when we started in the market, Starbucks was the next closest. That was the best instant coffee that was out there. There are now a couple other companies that have, sort of cloned our approach.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, most of the industry, hasn't really moved this yet.
Okay, interesting. So, walk me through the packaging of the product, because it doesn't look like a traditional coffee product. Never mind instant coffee product.
Yep, totally. Yeah, so we use single serve test tubes for the product.
Okay. And what made you pick that, out of curiosity?
So we started with single serves because as soon as you open our product, it starts to lose freshness. With any great coffee, it's generally pretty fragile. And so the great thing about instant coffee is if it's kept packaged, it could last for years. And so that's really great. But if you were to, for example, take a jar of our product and open it, and let's say, your kid accidentally opens the jar and leaves it unopened, it could literally turn into a rock over the course of a couple days. And so because it's absorbing water from the air as fast as possible. So we wanted to keep it at single serves at first because we wanted to make it really, really easy, really, really simple, and error proof, so that anybody could have this really great coffee without doing any work. It was just, one tube, one cup, that's it. There you go.
Sure.
And the test tubes actually started out kind of by accident. I think one of our advisors recommended it to us as, hey, well, this would be really cool and scientific, and it would look like a lab experiment.
Interesting.
And yeah. And more importantly, we could buy them online. We could buy them on Amazon. We didn't need we didn't need a
smart.
packaging line. We could hand fill it, which is what we were doing. And then as we launched with it, we noticed it was really Instagrammable, and for an e-commerce brand,
Sure.
people started sharing it and showing it online. Now, I think a few years later, we've also realized that for single serve, it's the most eco-friendly option that we can provide.
Sure.
So K-cups are not recyclable.
No.
And then even those foils, like a Starbucks Via packet, is not recyclable, but our product is recyclable. And so that was really, really important to us.
Yeah, the whole packaging is then, like, from the box to the bag to obviously like the lid and then the test tube itself. Yeah. Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah, exactly. It's basically 100% eco-friendly. And that was, really critical.
Well, and the other thing too is you could easily put one or a few of them in your pocket or in your purse or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, we find a lot of our customers, they keep them everywhere. Someone will have some in their desk, they have some in their backpack, have them in their pocket, in the suitcase. And so, wherever you go, you kind of have that, and it's like an emergency stash for a really good coffee.
Sure. But you guys also have a pouch as well, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And
So
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so we found that I was talking to a couple customers, and someone said, "I wish I could have this every day, but it's just a little too expensive." And I asked her, where are you using it? And she said, "I'm using it in my kitchen. I'm not really traveling with it." And great. Well, what if we gave it to you in a pouch, and we could make it a lot cheaper that way. Downside is it wouldn't last that long. It wouldn't last as long as soon as you open it. And she said, "No, well, I'm going through it, so that's not a problem."
Sure.
And I said, "Great, okay, let's try it." And so we created that product.
Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. I love how you took customer feedback and created a new line, right? I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's made most of the decisions at Sudden. I try to talk to customers at least a couple folks a week. If you subscribe to Sudden, you'll get an email from me to schedule a time to chat.
Okay.
And that's usually how we make most of our decisions.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So you guys have a couple different roasts. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So we have a light roast and a medium roast.
Okay. Are you guys going to do any others, or you just want to stick with that for now, or walk us through that?
Yeah. So we're actually now changing the business in a pretty big way, and it's really, really exciting for us. We're starting to work with roasters more closely and create branded products for other roasters. So in the Bay Area, so we already work with 5: Equator Coffee, Intelligentsia Coffee, Ritual Coffee, Chromatic Coffee, and Ozo Coffee.
Okay.
And basically, if you own a chain of cafes and you make your own coffee beans, you can send us as little as 250 pounds. We will convert it into your own line of instant coffee.
Oh, interesting.
And we found that it's a great way to educate customers on what instant coffee can be, and the community's been really supportive. And so now we only have 2 on our website right now, but in reality we have 5 different roasts or 5 different beans that we use, and we're just figuring out exactly what the right strategy is for our website for how we're going to launch those. But the plan, imagine you come to our website 6 months from now, and you could find dozens of different coffees from all these different roasters.
Sure. Well, it's interesting, right? Because I've been to San Francisco a few times, and one of the greatest things about being in San Francisco is the coffee, right? And so if I can get some of those coffees shipped to me somewhere else in the world that I can only enjoy if I'm physically in San Francisco, that's great, right? Or if I really like this and I'm traveling, you can just basically take it with you, where you can't really do that in a lot of cases now, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head 100%. I mean, our goal is that you can have your favorite coffee anywhere in the world. And especially, like a lot of people don't have access. Like a lot of people can't go to San Francisco.
Sure.
But right now they can't. There's not an easy way for them to get to try those coffees. Or if they do, they have to have all this brewing equipment and know how to brew it properly if they order the beans. And I'd love it if someone in Asia or Europe can experience coffee from here really easily. Like that's sort of that excites me. That's fantastic, and that's really what we've been able to do recently, which is great.
Sure. So do you guys just ship in North America or just the States or worldwide, or walk us through that?
Yeah. So today we ship we ship in the U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
On our website.
Okay.
We early on experimented in the first 6 months. You could buy it anywhere in the world.
Okay.
And we are actively trying to find distributors internationally who can make it available internationally for us.
Okay.
So there's a few places, we have someone in Pakistan. We're about to go live with someone in Dubai, who are going to be spreading the brand out to different countries.
Got you. No, that's very cool. And you guys have a subscription service as well. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So you can buy Sudden on our website either as a subscription or as single purchases.
Okay.
When we started, we were subscription only, and that was our original business model. And we found that we were limiting people from trying the product, or people who just wanted it for a camping trip couldn't really get it. And so we decided about 9 months ago to remove the subscription only option, and now we're much more focused on just having you try it and experience it. And it doesn't matter if you subscribe, or it doesn't matter if you have it 10 times or one time. We just want you to be able to share this, and that's kind of our mission.
Sure. So how long does the coffee keep in the little test tube then?
It'll keep for 9 months at least.
Okay. Interesting. That's a long time, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So roasted coffee beans, if you're buying beans from a cafe to make at home, it'll last 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so having that same taste 9 months later is pretty significant.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about where do you guys kind of see this thing going? Because you mentioned you're going to basically start working with all these coffee shops, but in a lot of cases, I think you could even work with the big brands as well, right?
Yeah, so I think that's where this is headed. We've developed a technology now, and we didn't intend on doing this when we started. I think we thought we were going to find people who could manufacture for us.
Okay.
But what ended up happening is we now have a way where we can make instant coffee that tastes phenomenal at a price point that's cheap enough to sell retail, and in batch sizes that are small enough that can support single origin coffees. Because the downside about single origin is, there's only a shipping container's worth of a specific coffee compared to, if you're Starbucks, you need to have, millions of pounds of that coffee to be able to sell it across all your stores.
Sure.
And so to be able to do that at small scale is really unique. And so the way that I see this going now is, imagine, there are hundreds of different roasters out there, and I think it's going to make sense for everyone to have an instant coffee version of their product.
Okay.
And so imagine, you go to Whole Foods and you see a new instant coffee aisle, and, there are dozens of brands of your favorite coffees out there. And this is already happening. Ritual Coffee, one of our partners, is sudden into Whole Foods in January or February. And so we're starting to see this evolution where I really think this is going to be a category. And I hope it's a way that, becomes a really primary way that people drink coffee. Instead of having to go buy a pot or, brew an entire pot, if you just want one cup at home, this is going to be the way to do it. And that's really where I see it going.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I almost see it like an alternative to like the K cups, like that you mentioned earlier, right? I think some of the biggest appeal of it is I can buy dozens of different flavors and then cherry pick what I want to drink right now and then maybe later in the day or whatever, right? But with what you guys are doing is I could get your brand, like I could maybe buy one or two of them at the store and then two more of another brand. Like I could potentially buy individual ones from a bunch of different brands and then just pick the ones I want to drink then and there instead of buying even like full bags, right? And then it almost eliminates that K-cup kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because you could basically how big are the test tubes? Because it's hard to judge size on screen, but are they the size of maybe like chapstick or a little bit bigger or what's the size on them?
Yeah, they're slightly bigger than chapstick.
Okay.
It's probably, and they're 4 inches tall.
Okay. Yeah, so you could easily put like a ton of them in a shelf or something in a grocery store or almost when you're at the checkout, right, where they have the chocolate bars and gum and stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah, and it's already in there in some stores. We have a stand where they stand up, and you can buy singles and just have one cup of coffee.
Interesting. No, that's cool, man. So I'm curious though to know a little bit more about your process, because are you guys kind of constantly trying new things or you figured it out and you're just going to keep going with it, or what's your kind of innovation process?
Yeah, so we're trying new things all the time.
Okay.
I think our primary objective is around reducing cost.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we started with something that was really high quality, and it used to cost us $6 to make each cup of coffee.
Okay.
And we were selling it for $6, so we weren't making any money.
Gotcha.
And so our innovation, or what we focus on, is how do I make it cheaper while maintaining or improving quality?
Okay.
Is really what we have to figure out.
Sure.
And so because of different process changes, we've been able to reduce cost by half every year. And so now, we're just at the point where it costs us about $1 to make each cup of coffee, and we're aiming for it to cost us 50 cents by April. Gotcha. And so we want to be able to offer this for $1.50 a serving. Currently, as of only a couple weeks ago, you can now buy $2 per serving. Okay. It was $3 per serving in September.
Gotcha.
And so we keep lowering the price.
Gotcha.
But the way that we brew it now, we basically take coffee beans and we grind it. Currently we're working with a supplier that has a machine and process that can brew the beans that we sort of,
Gotcha.
vetted and work really closely with. And then we concentrate it and then we freeze dry it.
Okay.
And that sort of is how we were able to make it, really, really efficient. And the way that we do each of those steps is really unique. A lot of it is trade secrets that we've specifically developed that make it work. And then in April, for example, we've actually invented a totally new brewing process that both improves the quality and decreases the cost. And so we're moving to that, which is another big change we're making.
Very cool. So are you guys still doing, other than the part you mentioned, that you have a company to brew the beans, Are you guys still doing a lot of the rest of it, like packaging it yourself, or have you got like a co-packer or something?
Everything else is in-house.
Okay.
100%. We currently fill each tube. It's semi-automatic, so there's a person who is, hits a machine pedal on a machine, and powder goes in one tube at a time. In January, we're moving to a fully automated line, which is actually going to also improve quality, and so we're sort of building out all these core competencies internally.
Very cool. I love how you're constantly improving and trying to automate and make things as cheap as possible, right? And then transferring that savings onto the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the cool thing, and I think people assume the opposite of this, is things that make it cheaper also improve quality. So a lot of folks will see a price reduction and assume that, oh, that means it got worse. You're using worse ingredients. But, the packaging line we're buying, for example, it will nitrogen flush the tubes before coffee goes in. So it makes it oxygen free, which increases the shelf life.
Got you.
So, and it's automated, which means it happens faster. And so that is going to decrease the cost and improve the quality. And it makes sure the caps will seal on, more readily. And so that has happened in a bunch of different ways throughout the process.
Gotcha.
And that's really cool. And I think something that isn't obvious from the outside.
Sure. But if people are already paying $3 per serving, why would you make it $2? Like, what was the rationale behind doing that?
So again, from talking to a bunch of customers, we believe there's sort of this cliff when you go under $2 that makes it okay to drink more regularly. So if how people have framed it is, at the end of the day, this is a take-home product. Thing that you can't grab and go and drink it in the same way that you could with like a granola bar. And so because it still requires a little bit of work, like you still have to boil water and pour it, folks have told us, it feels like it needs to be under $2, $1.50, before it can really replace my everyday habit. Because above that, if I'm paying, someone said, I'm paying, it's the same price as a cup of Starbucks coffee. And I said, would you rather have this over Starbucks? And he's like, I would rather, Sudden is way, way better than Starbucks. But for some reason, mentally, I just feel like it needs to be under $2 because I have to just do a little bit of work.
Interesting.
And that sort of made sense to us. And when we started the company, this was 3 years ago now, we said, well, what's the next best instant coffee? Starbucks Via. That's about 75 cents a serving. I said, it kind of makes sense for this to be $1.50. Thumb in the air, that's roughly what we want to aim for. And so that's still feels right for where it needs to go.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's cool that you guys are that in tune with your customers and you take their feedback and actually implement it, right? But I'm also assuming that you probably get some wild requests that you're like, well, we're just not going to do that. Or do you try to do most of the things that customers recommend to you guys?
Yeah, we definitely get a lot of requests, and it's hard to figure out which ones to listen to and which ones not to. A big one is, folks asking for flavor like hazelnut coffee or vanilla coffee, or exactly, asking for cream and sugar in their coffee, built in.
Interesting.
We actually got I actually got some advice recently about how to filter out the noise that I think is just really makes sense for anyone working on a startup. Listen to so we sent out a poll that said, sudden coffee didn't exist, how disappointed would you be? And there were people who said very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And the advice was basically listen to listen to the feedback from the people who are either very disappointed or somewhat disappointed,
Okay.
because they're very close to being very, very happy with the product. But don't
Interesting.
listen to the people who say they would not be disappointed. Like, they're super far off and they're not going to be, interested in the product. And so the people who said, I'm not disappointed, were the same people. The people who said I wouldn't be disappointed if Sudden didn't exist anymore were the people who fixated on things like, I want to have, like, I need to have more options, more roasts, more, flavors and all this stuff. And the people who said, I really like it, but but there's just a little bit that's off for me, focused on either the price or wanting it to not be a subscription.
Yeah, no, that's actually really good advice. You're right, because you can end up chasing your tail with the customers that are just not, that wouldn't be disappointed, because they'll suggest crazy things and you might try to implement them, and then it'll be another thing and then another thing, and they'll never be happy. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, totally. As I luckily came from a product management background, and
Okay.
that's what you see. You're trying to convince someone to buy something, and they put up a door like, I'm not going to buy it because you don't have this.
Yeah.
And the question is there another door right behind it?
Yeah.
Or is that the door that's going to lead them to buy it? And filtering that out is really difficult.
No, that's fair. So is there any other advice you'd give to people that are doing a startup or getting into the food and beverage space?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I've realized recently is just how much there are these random events that sort of end up that you couldn't really predict and end up massively changing the direction of your company.
Okay.
One example, and I've been calling these Black Swan events.
Okay.
And the idea is, like, one example of this is the second time we raised funding, we made a prototype of the product. We sent it to a coffee reviewer in the New York Times. He made this post he wrote an article about Sudden Coffee, and an investor and the girlfriend at the time, now his wife of an investor, happened to read the article, passed it to this guy. He read it. He happened to be looking for a caffeine-based subscription business, and then was in San Francisco, called us up, and we got a term sheet for an investment within a week.
Wow.
And the next time I tried fundraising, it was a much longer process, like 9 months, sort of slogging away at making it happen.
Sure.
And that was really unpredictable. And so I realized that a lot of times, we tend to really focus on, like, what is the to-do list of things that I need to do to hit my next goal, and I'm going to make this really long list.
Sure.
And I'm going to just start focusing on them. And then the things that allow you to sort of broadcast what you're working on, or get connected with random people, things like going to a conference, or things like writing a blog post, just to tell your story, where, like, if you're doing the math, you're not going to be able to put a dollar value on that blog post.
Right.
Whereas you might be able to put a dollar value on improving that Facebook ad.
Sure.
But that blog post, or that PR event, or that company party you threw, that might get the right person excited about Sudden, who might come join your team, who might change the direction of the company. And so I realized more recently that it's really critical to invest time in these things that could generate these random occurrences, even if you can't, make a business model for why you should do that thing.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, right? And it's just putting yourself out there, really, and making connections and creating content. It's interesting what that can do, right? And you're right, you can't really put a dollar value on that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a lot of folks who, especially in the Bay Area, a lot of folks who become entrepreneurs are coming at it, from the tech side where they were an engineer. And I came from this also. And so like when you're approaching something with an engineering standpoint, you're always focused on is this the most optimal action that I should be taking right now?
Yeah, interesting.
And so those things that you can't put a dollar value on, you're just not going to do.
Sure.
And so that's where you get caught in that trap. And that's, I think, my biggest realization recently has been to not listen to that and do the opposite.
No, I think that's really good advice, but we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and any other links you want to mention.
Yeah. So if you're interested in checking out Sudden, you can buy Sudden on Amazon.
Okay.
Just search for Sudden Coffee. You can also buy it on our website, suddencoffee.com. And for listeners of the show, we created a discount code called Future Show. And so if you just type that in on our website during checkout, just wanted to give people a little treat for listening, and really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks very much.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.